This is TWiT.
All right, now we got to talk about the bad stuff, the epic stuff. All right. So Apple it's a kind of an off and on thing. Epic complained last week, Apple won't let us be on the App Store in the EU, even though they're supposed to, because they say our buttons look too much like them. Then Apple says, okay, fine, and approves it. They approve Epic Games. It's not on the App Store; it's an actual store, right? I don't know. We don't live in Europe.
Yeah, it's a store.
And then Epic is still pissed off. So I don't. That's Epic, isn't it? In a nutshell.
Well, I think the bottom line is Apple keeps on dragging its feet, and Epic is hyperbolic.
Right? They want to move.
Epic has learned we're just going to yell at the top of our lungs all the time, and what they're and so eventually they're going to find what most parents find is if you yell at the top of your lungs all the time, you have to yell at the top of your lungs all the time. So, but they are, they're hyperbolic about everything. Apple is going slower than they could go on all of those things. I mean, I think that the button issue, I think, is really Apple not wanting it to look like their site to make sure that if something goes wrong, you're really clear where you were.
Yeah.
But
Epic says, hey, look, everybody uses the word install. Everybody uses the words in-app purchases. Apple's complaining about that. Those are naming conventions. Apple says you can't make certain buttons and labels similar to those in the App Store. Not having seen what they're proposing or what Apple's rejection says, it's hard for us to guess. This is a Reuters story.
It does sound like as much as I'd like to think that this is I like a good rhubarb, especially when a rhubarb can escalate into a Donnybrook. I'm a big fan of that. But like this just sounds like they find themselves stuck in the usual miasma of App Store approvals, which is Apple rejected my app for a reason that doesn't make sense because they've approved other apps that do the same thing. But now for some reason, because somebody didn't get enough protein at lunch or whatever, it's been rejected for that reason. And I have to keep resubmitting until they decide that I've had a good steak for lunch, and now I'm open mind to interpret this rule more broadly. And this is something that everybody seems to go through. So I don't know if it is malice. I'm guessing it isn't, but it really is illustrating once again one of the big problems of the App Store, which is it can seem so arbitrary and so frustrating when you've got so much lined up with. We chose to launch in July for a very, very good reason, and now we can't launch in July for reasons that Apple won't explain to us, and we don't know when we're going to be able to launch. So we're missing out on all these opportunities we thought we were going to have by picking our date. So
it may be a foofara or a kerfuffle. We don't know.
But if you're going to make pie, use rhubarb.
Sure.
Can you please?
We're not quite sure yet. We're not listing into the. So I think Alex. Honestly, this could be a very short show because I think Alex encapsulated it perfectly, which is Epic is going to complain and make a big deal. They've seen some results of that, although they've also lost a bunch of court cases, but they're going to make a thing of it. And the other side of it is that Apple is dragging its feet. And my problem with this is the global problem here, which is when Apple introduced its whole cryptographic system of verifying apps and signing them and approving them through Gatekeeper, this whole notarization process. They did it for the Mac like 6 years ago. They said at the time, this is not a way for us to get the Mac App Store to exist outside the Mac App Store on the Mac. This is just a security scan. Now for Europe, for iOS, they said, okay, we're going to have to do something like that, notarization for Europe, but we have to do more than we do on the Mac because it's not the Mac, it's iOS, and there's a higher level of security. So we're going to do additional human level security checking and approval, and it's going to take a little bit longer. But it's all, the context was supposed to be it's notarization. It's for a very specific limited scope that they're allowed by the regulators without being a gatekeeper. And my concern, if you listen to Riley Testoot of AltStore say that they've had Apple dragging its feet on a bunch of things, if you listen to the developers of those emulators who said that Apple refused to notarize those emulators for the EU, and now for Epic, what I see is a pattern of behavior, which is Apple turning this thing that is supposed to be a neutral, security-focused thing, notarization, which is a very good system to keep their users safe, and trying to import more arbitrary App Store policies into it. And the danger is that what's going to happen is that, and maybe Apple wants this, I don't know, is that the European regulators are going to say, you've ruined... Congratulations, Apple. You've ruined notarization. And without notarization, it really is more dangerous, vastly more dangerous than the notarization system that Apple uses just for the Mac. So that's what bugs me about it is, look, Epic is going to do their thing. They're going to be annoying. They're going to complain about everything. It's self-serving. I am a little worried about the fact that Apple is taking this notarization process and applying seemingly arbitrary App Store kind of judgments when it's not supposed to be that.
It's, I am a little sympathetic to Apple because their trade dress is, of course, very important to them. Remember last week, the kerfuffle, tiff, Donnybrook over Figma AI. Andy Allen, who is the guy behind Not Boring Software, asked Figma's AI designer to design a not boring weather app, and it looked, almost identical to Apple's weather app, so much so that Figma decided to pull the tool. I don't know if Apple complained or not, but it's an issue. On the other hand, you can also make the case with this weather app, just as Epic has, that, well, there's kind of a standard for weather apps. I mean, you're showing the temperature, you're showing the range. I mean, there's not a lot of variation. There might be kind of a standard, kind of natural way to show weather. You don't want people to have to do everything unnaturally, because Apple's the first to do it naturally, or has trademarked the natural expression of something.
And it sounds like this is things like an install or a buy or an open button that you would find in an app store or an app marketplace, and that Epic has said they're not trying to make people think they're in, trick them into being in the app store. And of course, you've got to go through a whole long stretch of things to install on an alternative app marketplace. So there really shouldn't be a lot of misunderstanding going on there. And again, I think it's fair that maybe Epic is up to doing weird ploys here, and that Apple is being more of a stickler than maybe they should because they don't trust them at all. I think those are absolutely reasonable. It just bugs me, this idea that the whole purpose of this alternative app stores and all of that is to get out, to let people, if they choose, get outside of Apple's system of approval. And what we see is Apple saying, actually, no, it doesn't. And the problem with that is that the regulators can come in and say, well, that you can't do it that way.
But I think that also, I think there is probably an effort by Epic. I mean, you can use the same words, but how the button looks and how it operates and everything else feels different between many different.
Does Apple own rounded corners?
No. But the point is that I think that Apple
that they did. Sorry, Samsung.
Apple.
Right.
I think wants it to be very clear so that you don't suddenly, there's a lot to get into that thing, but it could get to a point where you don't remember where you bought it.
Right.
And what Apple probably knows is that the type of developer that is going to develop outside of the Apple, App Store experience is probably going to be a little bit more edgy, and there's probably going to be more, either Epic is going to have to clamp down pretty hard, or people are going to get taken advantage of, or things are going to happen bad. And I think Apple wants to make sure that people are really clear that you were in over here. And so that when you have that bad experience, you'll connect it to that app store. I think that's what Apple's trying to. Well, I think if Epic had made buttons that looked completely different than the App Store, Apple would have let it go through without stopping it, because I think they just want it to look different. They just want it to look different so that you're clear that when you get screwed up by it, you're clear of where you got screwed up by it. And that, because Apple, I guarantee, is planning PR around it. Like it's going to be a problem, and they're planning to bash this store the moment anything major happens with an app on the store.
Well, that's exactly what I was saying. It's difficult. I guess
any of us would do that. I mean, maybe not any.
You got to protect your trademarks.
Yeah. If you told me to do something that I don't want to do, I would do it. I would
drag
go
my
as slow
feet
as possible.
Yeah,
I am not like you told me something I really, really don't want to do, so now I'm going to do it. Everyone who pays their taxes goes, oh, I think I'm just going to pay all the taxes that the IRS told me to do. I'm not going to go to anyone to try to figure out any way to pay any less taxes because I want to pay all the taxes. I mean, that's the same as, like everyone, no one wants to do more than they have to. And Apple's going to keep on going, I'm not going to do more than I have to.
Yeah.
And that's what you can be guaranteed is that when you're telling someone to do something that they don't want to do, they're not going to do more than they have to, and so the government can try to do it. But the problem the government's going to find out, and what they already found out, is that you start micromanaging all this stuff, and Apple can just keep on. I mean, you look at the AI stuff. Many companies do not release many products in many regions for many reasons. And so it's going to be very hard for them to just go, well, you have to release everything that you make into the EU. And so all of this starts to get sticky. And the bottom line is that the EU and Epic have got their hands into this gooey mess, and they're trying to figure out how to get out of it. And it's going to be very hard for it to actually get somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it's just to me, it's just the really natural amount of difficulty when you go from having no regulation whatsoever to suddenly having rules that a company having to operate by rules that they did not create themselves based on like what their own internal management and production is set up to do. So yeah, there are going to be some problems. There's going to be some problems with a company like Apple legitimately not knowing if something they plan to do is legit or not according to these new rules, or just I'm going to try to declare my new $10,000 sofa as a dependent. And now it's up to the IRS to find out that little settee is not actually a 3-year-old child, that it's actually a sofa. I think Apple is going to try to do kind of both. And and you're absolutely right. I mean, they're very well motivated to try to do stuff like this, because despite the fact that the EU is definitely honking down their snorkel in a way that they are not going to appreciate, they are also not. They're not trying to develop a new feature that their customers have been raging at them to give them. It's not like, well, look, we have to have this new camera feature out because people want to be able to record a 4K 60 frame per second video. So we have to do what we have to do to make this happen. Whereas Apple knows that, look, if we drag our feet to make sure that we can maintain as many of our own objectives as possible, including making sure that everybody who uses our phones knows the difference between using the Apple App Store and anything that is not the Apple App Store. They're definitely going to go through that procedure, which is not something that I fault them for at all.
Can we make honking down their snorkel the new hawk toa?
I thought it should be the new one. I just want to say that's a title. We have a title.
Honking down their snorkel. Did you make that up, Andy, or is that a common term around the Rhode Island area?
That is from like a season 2 or season 3 episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000, in which the Mads call in and Joel says, "Oh, the mad scientists are barking down my snorkel," and then like answers the call.
It's a really good.
Using that.
It's a very evocative image. Yeah,
yes,
I like it. Hey, it's Leo Laporte. If you enjoyed this little snippet of our programming, make sure you check out the full MacBreak Weekly. The link is right down there.